Hi class, today we are going to do a quick review of slope and linear equations and how to actually write and also graph them. So let's start with looking at slope. Well, slope is represented by the letter M, and it is the rise over run, which represents the steepness of a line. We also have both positive and negative slopes. So let's think about a negative slope. What does that line look like? Well, if you have your coordinate plane, and these are your axes, your y-axis and your x-axis, a negative slope will look something similar to this, where it has a downward trend from top left down to bottom right. And if we're looking at a positive slope, again, here's your x and y axis, a positive slope will have an upward trend, so from bottom left to top right. We can also use slope to help us find, we can also use slope in an equation form. So if you're given 2 points, you can find slope by using this mini equation where m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So basically, if you have 2 points, let's say our given points are, let's just make these up, 3, 4, and -1, 0. If these are your points, then you have point 1 is x1, y1, and point 2 is x2, y2. Just don't forget when you are using the slope equation, it is rise over run. So rise would be that change in your y values, because remember your y-axis is this one going up and down over here. Okay. So let's just go a little bit further with that. I know that you guys have talked about parallel and perpendicular slopes in previous courses. What does it mean for slopes to be parallel or for slopes to be perpendicular? Well, if you have parallel slopes, which we use this little equation, or excuse me, a little symbol here, double lines, parallel slopes are the same, so they are equal. Perpendicular slopes, we use this upside down T. Perpendicular slopes are opposite reciprocals. And remember, opposite referring to the sign and reciprocal referring to the fraction itself. Okay, so now that we've looked at slope a little bit, now let's look at our equation for slope-intercept form of a line. Excuse me. So slope-intercept form is represented by the equation y equals mx plus b. So there's that m again, there's your slope. And think about this. What is b? What is b? What does b represent? Well, if you don't remember, b represents the y-intercept. So we'll talk about that a little bit further. So what is an x-intercept? What is a y-intercept? I just used that phrase, y-intercept. Well, intercepts are places where a line crosses an axis. So an x-intercept is a place where the line crosses your x-axis. It can be found by setting y equal to 0. So when y equals 0, you will come up with an x value, and that will be your intercept. Therefore, an intercept is usually written in the form of a number, comma 0, because when y is 0, we will get a number value to represent our x, that being a point. So that's the point where the line crosses the x-axis. Same thing with our y-intercept. So our, y-intercept is the point where, get rid of that. The point where the line crosses the y-axis. So if we make our x value 0, the point will be 0, comma, a number. So now let's think about the steps in graphing a line. Before we write equations of lines, before we go into finding an equation of a line, let's think about how you graph an equation of a line. So if you graph the equation on the line, y equals 3x plus 5. Let's take a look at this line. We want to always start with your y-intercept. So start by plotting B, your y-intercept. So our y-intercept here is 5. So we're going to start, in this particular example, we would start by plotting the point 0, 5. From there, we want to use our slope to find another point. So if we have a slope of 3, our slope is really a rise of 3 and a run of 1. So from the point 0, 5, we would go up 3 and over 1. And we're going to look more at that closely as we get through the rest of these examples here today. And just to go over some special lines, what is the slope of a horizontal line? So let's think about it. If we have a coordinate plane, x and y-axis, if we have a coordinate plane and we have a horizontal line, here's that horizontal line. Think about the axes that it's going through. It's going through the y-axis. Think about the slope of it, the rise and the run. When I go from a point on this line to another point on this line, am I rising anything? No, I'm rising 0 and I'm running, let's say 2 or 3. So my slope is 0 over 2, which then gives us just 0. So the slope of a horizontal line is always going to be 0. Let's think of a vertical line. Same concept here. Here's your y and your x-axis. And if you're looking at a vertical line this time, my vertical line has a rise of, let's say if I'm going from this point up to this point, let's say we have a rise of 2 and a run of 0. What happens when you do 2 divided by 0? Well, hopefully in your calculator it'll tell you undefined. Well, it'll tell you error, actually. But that just means that it is undefined. So hopefully you will all remember that you cannot divide by 0. So the slope of a vertical line will always be undefined. We can abbreviate it with undefined there. All right, and last equation, what does the B tell you? And we already talked about this. B is your y-intercept, and it is your starting point for graphing. All right, so now let's take a look at a graphing example. So if we have this equation, y equals 7x minus 3. Pull out your m and your b. So m is 7, b is negative 3, because remember this is like plus a negative. So we always want to start with that b, that y-intercept. So my starting point is at 0, negative 3, which is down here. My slope is going to tell me my rise and run, but this is just a 7. So remember, that's really a 7 over 1. So what this is saying is that from this point, negative 3, you're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and to the right, 1. So we have a point right there. So I actually cannot fit any other, sorry, my line is a little messy there. I cannot fit any other points on my graph, so that would be my line. And let's do one more example. If we have a slope this time of negative 5/4 and a y-intercept of 4. So your y-intercept is going to be up here at 4. And it has a slope of negative 5/4. So be careful here. You want to either make the 5 negative or the 4 negative. We don't want to make both negative, because think about this, some side note here. If I made a negative 5 over negative 4, what's that going to give me? That's going to give me a positive 5/4, and we have a negative slope. So we want to make sure that our slope is kind of going downward, like so. So I'm going to make my 5 negative, because if I look at my b equals 4, which I already plotted, if I go up 5, I'm going to be off my graph. So I'm going to go down 5, and I'm going to make my 4 positive. So I'm going down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to make a positive 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my point right there. And if I can, oh, sorry guys, I'm shaking hand today. If I can plot another point, I would highly suggest that you do so. I would prefer 3 points on a graph, but if you can only fit 2, then you can only fit 2. Nothing you can do about it. All right. All right, real quick, I do want to go over writing an equation of a line. Given a point and a slope, you're going to do more practice with this on your own before class tomorrow, and then we'll get more into other equations of lines. So in this example here, we have a slope of 6/5, and it's going through a given point. So we're going to use our slope-intercept equation, which is y equals mx plus b. And we're going to use this point as our xy ordered pair, and this 6/5, remember, is our slope, which is just n. So what we're going to do is we're going to find our b. So we have y, we have the m, and we have the x. We're finding b. So plugging in here, we have 5, coming from this 5, equals 6/5, which is your m, times the other 5, which is representing your x, plus b. So solve this out. We have 5 equals, remember this is really 5 over 1, so when I can cross cancel when I multiply those, and I'm left with just a 6 over 1, which is just 6, and then plus b. Subtract 6 from both sides, and we should get b equals -1. So if b is -1 and m is 6/5, then y equals 6/5 x minus 1. So that would be our linear equation in slope-intercept form. Hopefully I'm not going too fast with this because this should just be a review. Let's try one more together. Again, we have an ordered pair, x and y, and we have our m, our slope. So if we're using y equals mx plus b, fill in everything you have, which is the y is -3, b is 5/3, x is -3, and b is what we're trying to find. So again, remember that this is really a -3 over 1. We're allowed to cross cancel yet again. So I have -3 is going to equal, be careful here, this is a -5 plus b. Continue solving by adding 5, and b equals 2. So therefore your linear equation, is y equals 5/3 x plus 2. Okay, so hopefully this little review went over all the basics with slope and equations and graphing. We're going to get a little bit further into equations of lines tonight with some practice, as well as tomorrow in class. Feel free to watch this again if you have any questions. You need to have a full understanding of slope before we move on tomorrow in class.